In a moment like this, we all have a responsibility to resist. If you're a teacher, a journalist, a politician, a cook, if you are a business owner, whoever you are, we gotta work together at the ground level, at the block level, at the neighborhood level to know what's coming and to know that you need to have a strong bonds of solidarity to support each other in those moments.
Hello, and welcome back to In the Meanwhile. I'm Nora Kenworthy.
And I'm Marcus Harrison Green.
Quick programming note: unlike certain vice presidents, we will not be replacing journalism with refusing to pearl clutch.
Yeah, we checked the style guide and quote unquote not acknowledging racism is not neutrality. It's just, not acknowledging racism. So, yeah.
Exactly. If your group chat is praising Hitler, we're not calling that edgy sports banter or just boys being boys. We're calling it Nazism, Nazi fanboying, and also horrifying.
Oh my god, yeah. So, do consider this your trigger warning for honesty. Pros are optional. Accountability, however, is mandatory.
If you're wondering what the heck we're referencing, first, congratulations on sustaining your mental health this week.
Ashay, ashay, yes.
um, but leaked Telegram messages from young Republican leaders across the country have dropped 28,000 posts over 7 months, marinating in racism, anti Semitism, and violent fantasies.
Yeah, and the vice president's response was again, I refuse to join the pearl clutching, which is a bold stance when the pearls in question are, human dignity and maybe democracy. I don't know. But
It's amazing what they choose to clutch pearls about and what they don't.
I, it's in all, I mean, God, more like in all seriousness, like, how hard is it just to be like, yeah, that was probably racist.
Yeah.
Moving on. You know what I mean? Like,
Cross the line,
I
boys.
just, I just, I right, it wouldn't have made sense anyway. He could have even said the whole thing of like, "Oh, these are just, young folks and, I've made youthful, indiscretions before as well." I mean, I would hope that they wouldn't have blatantly been racism, but, c'est la vie, I suppose. Anyhow. Anyhow, but on to, more pressing matters, because in Chicago things are looking less like a city and more like a federal field test, unfortunately. There are helicopters over the South Shore neighborhood at 10:30 p.m., armored agents pouring out of vans, and families walking up to zip ties and tear gas. It's just been a truly, truly horrifying sight if you've seen it either on the news or on social media. Um, the Illinois governor rightfully called it abominable. And the Trump administration, unfortunately, keeps calling it a day that ends in Y. So,
Ugh. It really it does feel, Marcus, like it's almost impossible to absorb the scale of what's going on in places like Chicago. Like, there's no amount of doom scrolling that could possibly capture everything that's going on there.
yeah, there was, somebody who listens to this show was saying, they were they had texted me about our show last week, and they're saying how much they loved it, but
Mhm.
they thought that I was sort of overly pessimistic and negative. And I was kind of like, "Have you
You?
been listening to the show?"
No.
It's like,
That's my role on the
uh,
show.
so I'm glad you couldn't tell. Then but I will say this: I recently read a piece in Mother Jones, and it was about essentially the dual state, right, of the United States and how it's sort of becoming a sort of a safe haven for some, and then for others, it's essentially a state of terror. And the author, whose name is actually Pimi Levy, she was basically saying in an interview that the reason that fascism and authoritarianism was able to take hold in Nazi Germany wasn't so much the people that were true believers in Nazism. I mean, of course, they contributed to it, obviously, but it was the folks who were comfortable enough, right, to
Mhm.
just allow it to go on, right? The folks who were like, "Oh, well, it doesn't necessarily impact my day-to-day that much," right? It doesn't, it isn't, hurting my stock portfolio
Mm.
all that much. And so it's this sort of malevolent tolerance, if you will,
Hmm.
right? Of this evil. And it also reminded me of reading the book 12 Years a Slave. I know they made it into a movie, but the book is actually a diary uh, of this wrongfully enslaved man. I mean, hell, everybody was wrongfully enslaved.
All
I
slavery is
just want to
wrong.
say that, but
Put that out there.
right. But there's this passage that continues to stick with me since I've read that book like 20 years ago, where he talks about being enslaved, but it's with this the this slave owner is this guy who's fairly nice and so forth, and treats treats them well, and he's like, if I had my family here, this maybe wouldn't be so bad. I
Mm.
could, I could, I would be able to do this, for probably the rest of my life. And then, he sort of catches himself and he's like, what am I allowing myself to tolerate? Right.
Yeah.
Because, because of a level of comfort. Right. And so, why I really wanted to have this conversation that we're going to have today, and, why I think it's continue to feel that it's so important is that for me, it continues to throw darts, if you will, to puncture that comfort of people, right? Who are who are still so comfortable now. Of the folks who are like, yeah, but is it that bad? Like, it is that bad, right? I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
you have ICE agents, you have National Guard as well in American cities, right? That are treating these places as if they are war zones, and they are not. Like, with the pretext that crime is rampant and the facts be damned, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I said that to say I guess that's a long roundabout way to say that I'm feeling somewhat hopeful, but but I want to say that there is hope, right? That we can
There
it's
is
this
hope
this
in the discomfort.
Yes, I mean, well, and this is what I don't know how you feel about this, Nora, but like I keep getting people in my DMs and emailing me, and they're like, we need to build bridges with certain people and yada yada. And I'm like, look, I will leave the light on for folks who have just gone all the way to the far, 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 far right, where it's hard to have a conversation. I will leave the light on. But the folks who I am inviting in the house, if you will, who I am like actively trying to come sit at the dinner table, are the folks who aren't really that far gone at all, and
Yes.
and are, if you will, sort of 50-50, and quite frankly just need to be made, not just made aware of what's going on, but connected to their day-to-day living.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just curious about what you think about that whole conversation.
So many conversations. Yeah. No, I think it's really important for us to remember that we're like the people who are not comfortable with what's happening right now are very much still the majority, even though are not the party in power. And
Right,
I think part of what we're seeing right now is a real sort of effort on the part of a lot of powerful institutions to make us think that we're in the minority or that we're radical or that
right.
we're Antifa, God forbid. Or as people are going to be told, on Saturday the 18th when they show up for the next No Kings March that they are anti-American. Um,
Yes, and
and
kudos to those who are showing up. I will
yes,
be nursing a second beer at my homecoming festival, but continue on, sorry.
we wish you luck with that. Um, yeah, I mean, and so, like, even if you look at some of the tools that neighborhoods have been using to get the word out, to organize, it's really scary to watch those things being shut down. So, for example, the
Right,
Facebook group that neighbors were using to warn each other about ICE near schools and churches, that was suspended at the Trump team's request. So
right,
to the iPhone apps that people built for similar purposes. Over in LA, we have county officials declaring a state of emergency over immigration raids. And it's just, I think, a remarkable point at, not that far into the second Trump administration that we are dealing with entirely man made crises. that are taking down our neighbors and our loved ones, and people are trying to tell us that it's normal.
Yeah, I mean, this just seems to be America right now, right? Where Facebook will let all types of disinformation run rampant, on its platform, but it draws a line at neighbors warning each other about actual ICE agents, right? I mean, and this is supposedly a platform that is connecting, people together in community.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I don't know if I could like summarize what we're talking about here. I guess this is our episode of keeping people productively uncomfortable about what's happening
I love
uh,
that phrase.
in Chicago and elsewhere, about people like Maria, a tamale vendor on the west side who was bundled into a van in broad daylight while her kids watched, rideshare drivers arrested at O'Hare, TV producers cuffed while doing their jobs, neighbors in Broadview who keep showing up anyways, even after paintballs and pepper balls, and our neighbors in Portland who are showing up and creating street theater and absurdity with costumes.
Definitely on brand for Portland, let me tell
Yes, we love you, Portland. Keep it weird.
you. Well, I mean, and there's just still more. You have, judges that are, even when they're ordering ice fences down, you see these protest zones that are, shrunk by mayoral decree in certain places. And then, you have parents who are just figuring out how to get their kids to school without walking past a rate. And I have to say, I mean, it just feels so close now, right? And I'm thinking so, figuratively and literally, right? I mean, you have the National Guard and ICE agents down in Portland, which is again, it's 2 hours or so drive from Seattle, and I don't know. I mean, I've seen Stephen Miller, he's a senior advisor to Donald Trump, um, essentially call out Seattle on social media. So I can't I can only imagine that this is, or I should say, I can't imagine that this, isn't, that we aren't next, and we aren't, within these crosshairs here of the administration.
Mm,
That being said, even if we're not, I mean, the fact is that I think every city, specifically every city who happens to be any type of blue on the continuum of blue, uh, I don't think it's as alarmist to say they should be prepared for,
mhm,
for something very similar to Chicago and LA at this point.
yeah. I mean, I think part of the thing for people to remember is it's supposed to feel overwhelming.
Mhm.
Authoritarianism is overwhelming. It happens on a lot of fronts at once. It's supposed to feel scary and intimidating. It's supposed to be hard to stand up to. And so I think if people are feeling all of those things as they look at social media or they look around the streets of their neighborhoods, it's okay to be feeling those things, and yet also, like, all we have is ourselves to keep on
Yes.
showing up and refusing in whatever ways we can, in whatever ways feel possible or, um
I
yeah.
I gotta say too, Nora, and I'm truly trying to be serious here. Like kowtowing to authoritarianism is also very lucrative because I'm just, I
Yeah.
know we have a listening audience who can't see, but let's just say I'm in LA at the moment, and I could afford what might be a Motel 5 because I think 6 is a little too expensive. So I just, when you really do heed the call for the donations at the end of the show, because
Please.
anyhow,
Marcus needs better internet in his hotel room.
yes, it's $7 a day, folks. I'm on a firm payment just to get internet in here. That, that being said, I do want to just do a bit of housekeeping today. We do want to give folks a quick heads up
Mhm.
that today's conversation does include descriptions of state violence and raids. So if that is maybe a little too much for you right now, maybe come back to this episode
Yeah.
at a later date.
And take care of yourself however you need to, whether that's pausing, skipping, breathing, holding your pets closer as you listen.
Yes.
But I think we're asking you not to look away.
Yeah, authoritarians are betting on our numbness at this point.
Mhm. If you are in Chicago and listening, or anywhere that these raids are ramping up, please check our show notes for legal hotlines, rapid response networks, advice, mutual aid groups. And if you're not in one of those places, you're still in this story. We want you boycotting the corporations that are collaborating with ICE, donating to these organizers, and maybe just figuring out how to show up for your block. Sometimes the most radical acts are the most ordinary: feeding people, helping walk their kids to school, or even just standing your ground when the vans roll in.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that it's just, and I would just also say this: it is very important to continue to say it over and over again. Chicago is not a war zone. It is not a
No.
war zone. It is a community of people who are under siege at this moment, who continue to choose each other and continue to look out for each other, and that should be the real headline.
Mhm. Yes. So, today we're really honored to be talking with someone who's on the front lines of that fight, Chicago Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez. He represents the 25th Ward, including Pilsen, a historic immigrant neighborhood. And he's been a teacher, an organizer, and now the chair of Chicago's Housing and Real Estate Committee.
Alderman, welcome to the show. I wanted to start off by just asking you, we see so many news reports. Some things are more have more veracity than others, shall we say. So I wanted to just ask you what is actually happening on the ground right now in Chicago, and how visible and coordinated are these ICE raids, and what are you hearing from residents, in the neighborhoods that you represent?
Yeah, no, thank you. Where we are seeing is the unleashing of military forces, the unleashing of violence on working class people, innocent people, working hard people that are barely making ends meet in Chicago and across American cities, that now being meeting, that are now see the repression of the whole weight of the federal government in South Shore, in a predominantly black neighborhood. We saw how helicopters were descending on a neighborhood at 10:30 p.m. in the middle of the night, when this is a neighborhood in South Shore that, you know as we heard from neighbors, were terrorized when they saw helicopters, masked individuals coming out of um, U-Hauls, out of vans, coming in, and not, this is not about any criminals. I'm yet to see a single gun recovered from that shameful raid. But what we know is that they put children in ziplocs, they were tie them. We have families who were naked in the middle of the night, brought out outside. And we know that there were collaboration and collusion between this slumlord and the Trump regime, and these ICE agents that are operating, as a judge already said publicly in the ruling in Portland, Oregon, operating as the president's military personal militia. And when they come and terrorize, children, families, I mean, you see the horror of these stories. A 7-year old child with their mother fleeing, terrorize, that masked individuals that are trying to come and grab them and snatch him from the building. Unfortunately and thankfully, neighbors that gave him refuge. I mean, we're talking about operations, Gestapo operations that resemble Nazi Germany, not a democracy in the 21st century. We've seen also how military forces end up, after a traffic accident, ended up not only handcuffing, but choking a neighbor, a young black youth, in the middle of the street. We also seen how they assassinated one of our neighbors, Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, a resident, a cook, a father, a working class person that had just dropped off his two little girls, was trying to go to work, and is assassinated in a traffic stop. We also seen how ICE lies, literally, when they're talking about how we are a dangerous city and a war zone. They are trying to fabricate and create war zones. They went to Brighton Park last weekend, where many of us were tear gas, push, pushed to the ground. Many of young people, like, provoked by these masked individuals, that you can see the hate in their eyes. They do not look at us as human beings. Then they're up accusing a young woman, a 30-year-old woman, of threaten them, and they try to press charges only to be discredited and all the evidence to be proven false. And this 30-year-old neighbor got stuck in a traffic jam, and these individuals shot at her. They shot 5 times to a innocent person that was just driving by, and then they ended up tear gassing and terrorizing the whole neighborhood when people came to rescue and to respond to their neighbors. So what we're seeing is unleashing on terror of the military force that is resembling the personal militia of the president, who wants to unleash not only terror but wants to persecute dissent. This is not only about the immigrant community or the trans community. This is about constitutional rights. They're already talking about, they arrested a reporter, for God's sake. They arrested a reporter, and they have arrested people just for the way they look. So what we're seeing is terror, and a city also that has unified labor leaders, working leaders, elected officials, all of us condemning this. And I think the whole country should condemn this. And we also should start investigating the real crimes. Tom Homan taking a $50,000 bribe, the treason that some of these individuals are openly admitting when they're saying that they're going to come after those who they disagree with. This is unconstitutional. This is a break of our constitution. So when we see openly, the president saying that he's going to arrest our governor or going to arrest our mayor, out of what? There's no war here. There's nothing. We have a city that's been struggling for a long, long time by disinvestment, racism, police brutality. And I tell you another thing that I would like to make sure people know. Ron Emanuel and those people who cover up the Laquan McDonald murder, that closed 50 schools in the black community, they don't represent Chicagoans. For anybody who's giving these people a platform, they don't represent us. They never have, they never will. This is working people. We have a black progressive mayor, a former teacher who is trying to fight along many of us to protect our neighbors, and they're trying to terrorize us. We've been fighting Trump alone for a long time. And this is a time for all of us to come together to fight fascism and dictatorship and militarism of our streets together. Martin Luther King said it well. Militarism is a sickness, as the mayor has also repeated time after time, because it creates violence, it incites violence, it provokes, it snatches people. We have seen children being left in the vehicle after they snatch both of their parents, traumatizing our kids. People afraid of going to school because of the prospects of coming back. Tomorrow, by the way, we have a meeting with the city council with resolutions because they do not respect the executive orders that the mayor has put. They have not respect the judge, TRO, the temporary restraining orders on not deploying the National Guard because there's no crisis here, there's no insurrection, and there's also no violence. Yeah, there's no threats. What we've seen is a threat from the federal government, and they're dismissing the judge's orders to identify themselves, to use judicial warrants, to not use masks, to make sure that they don't use tear gas and other weapons of war on neighborhoods, and they completely dismiss that. Not only that, they have gone farther. Now they are now intimidating judges, like the judge in Portland, Oregon that I mentioned. They burned her house, and we're not talking enough about these things. They're not talking about the intimidation, the crushing of dissent, the breaking of the Constitution, including First Amendment rights. So this is a time, I think, in Chicago that people are fighting back, and we need to let people know across the country what is happening here.
Thank you so much for speaking so clearly about this really complex set of really terrifying issues that is happening in Chicago and obviously expanding to other cities around the US. Um, as you mentioned, Chicago has long histories of police torture. You mentioned Lacan McDonald, as well as immigrant raids, as well as economic violence in some of the neighborhoods where a lot of these raids are now happening. How are you helping to connect these intertwined struggles and avoid letting the state divide Black and Brown communities that really share a common enemy within the sort of white supremacist government that we have right now? And what's your message to communities that are being pitted against each other right now in moments of scarcity?
In a moment like this, I think it's important to know that we must come together to understand the interconnections in our struggles, right? Like we wouldn't be here without the Black community fighting for the civil rights and the liberties that we enjoy today, the Civil Rights Act. But then we also see judges now in southern states trying to roll back the Voting Rights Act, the equality of people under the law, and of course the right to public education and housing and many other things that they're trying to roll back. They're literally trying to take us back 100 years to the times of lynchings, the time of the Civil War. That's literally what they want to take us. And in a time like this, we got to interconnect our struggles. That's what we said, that the same drones that are flying in Gaza are flying here on our streets. The same level of inhumanity. They're openly telling us they want apartheid, they want more segregation. Look, Chicago has fight segregation for a long, long time. Martin Luther King prophetically said it. If if we can break the systems of oppressions in Chicago, it can happen anywhere in the country. And that's what we're seeing here. Because as you know, we've been one of the most segregated cities in the country. And there was a time in Cicero, Illinois, at the same place when they are snatching neighbors from parking lots in Home Depot and Walmart and those corporations that are complicit because they are collaborating and coordinating efforts with ICE and Trump. These are the same corporations. So we got to connect these struggles, right? Where corporate greed and billionaires who are, and that's what I mentioned about former mayor 1%, because those are the people that instill division in between our communities, right? So we need to unmask these fake progress. I don't even know how they call themselves, right? But we need to unmask them because then we can really build coalition, right? Because we see what's going on in Gaza, and that's the thing what Governor Pritzker has a struggle with. Because Governor Pritzker has a struggle recognizing the humanity of immigrants, the humanity of black and brown communities. You see what the poor management, even on the cannabis opportunities and many things that have happened, the cutting of access to healthcare. Now we have 534,000 Illinoisans without access to healthcare because Trump and his cronies decided to get rid of Medicare for all, I mean, Medicare for Medicaid, so that we have now more need and now we have the inability to respond. So, in a time like this, we need to build this coalition of working people. And what we said, one thing that we cannot and we will never negotiate is people's humanity. If it's people in Gaza or it's people on the south side or the west side of Chicago, that's what we condemn, like McDonald's murder. That's what we continue to condemn, the disappearing of neighbors in our communities. And if it's Gaza or the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago, the north side of Chicago, we fight with the same strength and the same vigor because we understand the interconnectedness. And that's what we got to make sure that in Chicago there is a fight, and there has been a fight. That's why we have a mayor that was born out of a coalition of working people that defeated the neoliberal nightmare. And neoliberals paved the way to fascists because they are dishonest, because they lied about the genocide, because they lied about immigration, because they lie about Medicare and the access to Medicare and housing and public education. And we find ourselves in this situation. So now we need to reckon with our history of our country, right? A history, we just remember Indigenous Peoples Day. We got to understand, right? We are here in a stolen land and the genocides, and we see now more and more stories about how indigenous communities were genocide, and then we see a live genocide playing with us, and we see the suffering of a black community that can be was enslaved and exploited for for generations and centuries, only now to fight for us in the civil rights movement. That's what I mentioned, the leaders of the civil rights movement, because this is an attempt to the third reconstruction in our country. We're grateful for the Black Liberation Movement that gave us the opportunity to vote, to have representation, and many of these protections are now being trying to roll back. They're trying to roll them back to take over our cities or communities and terrorize us and exploit us. Look, this is all about money. Look at how many these for-profit industrial for prison and school to prison pipeline, all these industries that are being set up for profit, right? To enslave and to exploit black and brown communities. And this is what we're seeing at the stake here. In our state, look, in Illinois, our prison population has gone from 50,000 people all the way now we're below 20,000 people. There's been significant efforts, or violence is down, violent crime is down over 30%. And we see that in a lot of American cities because of the hard work that has come on the ground to fight segregation, inequality, the corruption. And now we have real representation. That's what they're afraid of. That now we have a community of working people organized that are exposing the hypocrisy, the corruption, and the racism of the billionaire class and the corporate greed and all the interconnections. So this is about working people against the billionaire class. That includes the neoliberal fake people as Rahm Emanuel and cronies that have lied to us, that have lied over immigration reform, quote unquote, only to be the first ones undermining our sanctuary city laws when they were in office, right? And when there was the first one closing schools for the black community. How are they going to talk about quality public education for all? And now that we have a movement of people, we must unite. And I think this is also my pushback on members of the Democratic Party that are pushing back and criticizing Zoran Mondani in New York. We should get behind that platform, pushing back on the cronies of Trump and building a real coalition that includes Palestinians, that includes Jewish, black, brown, Asian, all black, young and old, all of us, all working people. But there are neoliberals who divide us. And I have seen, even right now, when we need to close the gaps on funding in our state, when they are, as you know, cutting public education, they just dismantle the whole special education division in the Department of Education. They dismantle it. They're dismantling um, EPA, they're dismantling food stamps, you name it. So we cannot, and this is my final point, that we cannot, talk about being an alternative to this fascist regime when we don't have an alternative. We cannot be having a rhetoric of working people, but a tax code that is a GOP textbook. We must be consistent. We got to tax the rich. We got to tax these corporations. Uber and Lyft, just yesterday, collaborating, allowing their workers to be snatched, not only being underpaid, now being subject of ICE detentions. We got to tax Uber, Lyft, Walmart, all these people, Google, all the people who are complicit, and the billionaire class, so that we can have enough funding and have less dependence of this federal government that is terrorizing us instead of functioning as a federal government that's supposed to be providing these safety nets. They're rolling it back to fill their pockets and their cronies.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, all I can say is amen to that, Alderman. I, we're here in Seattle, and so I know that we, join other cities who are looking at Chicago, watching what's going on from afar, and are just wondering, what does effective solidarity look like in this moment? I mean, you talked about coalition building, of course, but I'm just am curious about what you think other cities can do in terms of preparing for the level of federal incursion that you're seeing in Chicago, and not only how do they prepare for that, but to your point, how do they prepare in some ways to, yeah, be fortified against some of the also the sort of the economic damage that's going on, where you do have our federal government is threatening to take away federal funding from places like Illinois and Washington, because we're quote unquote blue states.
Thank you. And that is a great question. I think in a moment like this, I think all movements, all social movements have always been built from the ground up. The same students that were protesting and rejecting the genocide and rejecting the crushing of First Amendment rights, we got to build coalition with these students. That was my big criticism of the Democratic Party, that tried to crush the student movement and to try to censure them in a time that we need to uplift it, uplift those voices. And that's what we did in Chicago. We passed a ceasefire resolution. We listened to the students. We want to continue empower those young people to be the next generation of people who break those chains of oppression and take away these systems of oppressions that take from the very poor to give to the super rich. So we need to continue to build, and the biggest difference that we make is in our own neighborhoods, in our own blocks, building rapid response teams, building solidarity with labor leaders, faith leaders. As you saw, there were faith leaders who were getting shot in their faces with these rubber bullets because and these paintball guns that these mercenaries are bringing to our peaceful demonstrations. So they're faith leaders, people on the ground, people who are building in their own blocks, in their own neighborhoods. We have people doing deliveries, grocery deliveries to people's homes because they're terrified to getting out of their communities. People who are helping out walk children to schools. I talked to a mother that had 7 children that she was helping 7 families to take to schools. That's really solidarity. The economies of solidarity. Boycott Walmart, boycott Home Depot, boycott Google, boycott anybody complicit with this. Don't let them normalize it. Support your small business. We see people coming. I was very glad. I was with an influencer, Jolie, a veteran who came from DC to support the protests in Broadview, and ended up that evening. And she said, "Look, I want to go to a Mexican place because I want to meet people." And he ended up doing a live video in the middle of the bar when he ended up in tears because he said, "We love our diversity. Our diversity is the strength as a country, right?" And people invited me here out of love, out of care, and we're all brothers, sisters, and siblings. So, and then, at the same time, they were bringing attention. And I think that even if we have a lot of people in that bar, like people were just even we didn't say the name of it. Just people came because people have solidarity in their hearts. people have humanity in our hearts, and we cannot allow them to dehumanize us, right? They want to take us to the Nazi Germany. What I think that they're forgetting, that Stephen Miller, all these people behind Project 2025, that now we know what happened. We know those words of Anne Frank when she was warning people that there were people at light at night getting disappear, and the people is screaming right at night and warn us about that. So we have now the history that can warn us about the past, and we got to go after these corrupt. I mean, we got to invoke, the or we got to invoke our own laws. Look, a lot of these violations, bribery, treason, those are impeachable crimes, and I think that we should not be afraid of these individuals that are the minority, and we need to expect more from elected officials. So in Chicago, people have shown up. People continue to show up in wherever we are. Right now, they're in the southeast side terrorizing our communities. People went there too to express solidarity. So from delivering groceries to protecting schools, churches, hospitals, to showing up and including elected officials and demanding that we do more. Now we finally saw our governor saying, yes, finally, after all of this. But again, nevertheless, is the power of the people finally saying, yes, we will persecute these agents that are breaking the law. Yes, we have to make sure that there's no impunity when they're terrorizing, they're breaking families, they're exploiting us. Look, it's so tragic. These are or tamale ladies or people who sell flowers who are in construction places who are being doing landscaping. These are not criminals. They're people just fighting to survive that are fleeing violence. We are now going to join the very handful of countries that do not have asylum seeking processes, that don't allow people who are fleeing violence to come and find refuge. We've been often a place where many people, that's why we have so many Jewish residents, Palestinian residents, Ukrainian residents, Latin America, Africa, Asia, you name it, because we have been a country that upholds the right of of liberty and justice for everyone. But now we're seeing our own government betraying that very promise. How we can say that we are a country that upholding those values of freedom and justice when we fought the Nazis in World War II, only to now allow them to come and take over our country and terrify those who fought, veterans who fought that fight. It is incredible, the hypocrisy. And to tell America first when they are funding dictators like the one in Argentina, giving that maniac $20 billion when they give Chicago nothing but withholding our funds. The federal government is withholding billions of dollars of a 50-year project, 50 years for the south side of the city of Chicago to extend the red line. I was one of the members 6 years ago who fought hard to make sure that those funds get there. They're withholding those funds. They're withholding $800 million for violence prevention funds, $200 million of substance abuse programs, but yet they're talking about that they care about safety and the crisis of fentanyl and so forth. This hypocrisy at the higher level, and it's corruption. They're exploiting the same people that are being traumatized, the same people who are being snatched. They're forcing them to work in these facilities. They are getting reports of people drinking water from the ground in inhumane conditions. They are violating the law day after that. That's what we fought to shut down this facility in Broadview. And we continue to fight in every single way to work together in our neighborhoods to protect each other, to respond in big numbers, to do civil disobedience, and bringing a lot of people on October 18th, which is going to be a massive Knockings Day march. So Chicago is fighting in every single way in the courts, in the legislative bodies, on the streets, wherever we need to fight and telling the world, don't normalize this. A better world is possible. Act locally and think globally.
This is such a good call to action for all of our listeners, and I really appreciate you speaking so clearly and so loudly about what is necessary right now. We've seen cities like Portland now come under really considerable ICE presence. Here in Seattle, we feel like it's only a matter of time before this comes to us as well in greater numbers. What do you want to see cities like our own doing to prepare? And what do you want us to learn from Chicago's experience, both the mistakes and the successes, in terms of building communities that are ready to be resilient, to be um, communities that are willing to protest and mobilize to act against this federal assault?
Well, I would like people to know, first of all, that there are many more of us. There's very few of them, right? In terms of this project 2025, they oftentimes even deny it, right? They deny that the project 2025 is being executed and implemented as we speak. So they even know that it's a shame that what they're ultimately after, and they've seen more and more open about it, that they want martial law. They want to take us to they're already invoking the Insurrection Act. They are already going back and in red states, the gerrymandering to make it nearly impossible to have anybody but someone from the Republican Party, and the cover up of the Epstein files, and the cover up of the corruption of this regime that is just enriching themselves and their friends. So in a moment like that, we gotta be united as working people. I think one thing that in our state, unfortunately, that's what I mentioned, Rom Emanuel and these cronies that come in a time like this to take political advantage. When we have like 50,000 people that were sending humanely from Texas to Chicago, Chicago, Chicago was brave. Chicago was generous. Chicago was kind. Opened the doors and helped when the federal government was looking the other way, and the Texas governor Abbott and his fascist regime deployed the most inhumane way to deploy buses by the hundreds, thousands of people without a plan, without 30,000 people in police stations. Chicago showed up, so created an immigration and refugee rights office, creating an refugee rights campaign, creating these spaces where we can coordinate our efforts is very important. Not be ashamed of upholding of humanity or diversity or or identity as a nation, right? When we condemn Nazis, when we do not allow white supremacy and corruption to destroy it or freedom of speech is as Americans is the most American value I can think of, when we have the right to speak our minds. So that's what is at stake here. It's not only immigrants, trans rights, black, brown. It's all of us. It's all the right to dissent, to speak our minds, and to have a decent, dignified future for our families and for everybody to coexist in harmony. We're already seeing in Alaska what they're doing. When these neo-colonial projects come in and start, attacking and showing violence against indigenous communities in the name of, and in the name of what? To tell us of that. So imagine to treat indigenous communities as foreigners in their own land. What level of stupidity we have reached and allow this propaganda to disseminate, right? So know and feel proud to stand with your city. Feel proud to stand with your neighbors. These are your neighbors that you're protecting. They're not criminals, and that they have to use a judicial warrant if they want to operate in your city, and they need to identify to yourselves, and then they need to make sure that they do not wear masks, right? Because otherwise, what they're doing is incentivizing impersonators that we're already seeing coming up. People impersonating, people who are now snatching people, kidnapping people, right? Without, and we're seeing more and more those body hunters and so forth. That would be lawlessness, especially when the federal government doesn't care and is about the personal political agenda. So in a moment like this, we all have a responsibility to resist in whatever if you are, and that's what we see in Chicago. If you're a teacher, a journalist, a politician, a cook, if you are a business owner, whoever you are, we gotta work together. I think that you gotta, in this moment in time, unite all your neighbors at the ground level, at the block level, at the neighborhood level, to know what's coming and to know that you need to have a strong bonds of solidarity to support each other in those moments, to support your small business, to support your neighbors, to support your school, your church, your hospital, to support and demand of your elected officials to unite a united voice against fascism and police and state repression. And that we want to make sure is to create, we cannot go back to the norm because the normal was never good for those who black and brown. It never has been. So we need to reckon with our history. And those cowards who are afraid, who reckon with our history, right? So we need to provide and again, they are afraid too because they know that they will be judged by what is coming. So this is the moment to look in your eyes and look in the mirror and do what's right in wherever you are. If you're a veteran, condemn what's happening. Condemn. If you're a member of the National Guard, condemn what's happening. Do not normalize it. Do not comply with dictators or kings. Be the neighbor. Be what you strive to be. We gotta be the human beings that we want to be, and this is the moment. The solidarity of the moment. Solidarity economies to support our cities and to make sure that we don't support those corporations that are complicit. To denounce the most revolutionary thing that we can do in a time like this, Rosa Luxemburg said, in a time like this, is to speak loudly about what's happening. And that's what we need to do. And get out there, mobilize. If you can mobilize, you have the privilege, mobilize, get out there. If there's If this is about getting, if you're an attorney, volunteer your time. You have many people who are volunteering, donating their time to help each other out. If you can have time to help your fellow parent who cannot get their kids to school, if you can help with groceries, whatever that is, but build these systems of solidarity and care now, because now we're seeing a federal government that is funding war and military instead of health, education, housing, environmental justice, and the many things that we need. We need also in a moment like this, not only solidarity among our states, we need international solidarity in a moment like this. Inflation is going to be better, is going to be fought when we coordinate efforts so that we work together as brothers, sisters, and siblings, independent where we come from, to overcome the many challenges that we have as humanity. Climate boiling, we have the poverty, we have so many things that we need to address. Starvation of genocides that are happening around the world. So when we see each other's humanity, you see that we have such beautiful cities. Our American cities are beautiful because they have built with a lot of us, working people surviving and building it together. That's our social fabric. The billionaires are jealous because they don't know community. They are alone in this fight because loneliness and bitterness and greed is what drives them. Hate is what drives them. And that's going to take them so far. So let them swing while they can. Because when working people swing back, you see in King's Day, in the King's Day March, and the many, many more demonstrations to come, that we are the majority and they are the 1%. Elon Musk, Stephen Miller, Trump, all of them, Tom Homan, all of them are going to be gone. They're not there forever. And we need to fight for the world that we want to achieve together now.
Hey, there's not a better place to leave it. Alderman, thank you so, so much for your time. We continue to wish you well in your efforts in Chicago, and thank you so much for imparting so much insight and wisdom to our audience. So thank you.
Thank you.
Nora, so it's funny because we had a little bit of difficulty, getting the alderman on the show. Like there was, different links and so forth. And then I want to say that um his like legislative aide or assistant, let us know that he was running a little long for a meeting that he had, and his legislative aide was like, just so you know, too, he's had a real long day. He's had a lot of stuff has been going on, obviously, you know,
Yeah.
and he might be a bit low energy. And so I was like, after after talking to him, I'm like, man, if that's the decaffeinated version, my God.
I know we came in, like, totally guns blazing, like, hit all the notes in less than half an hour. That was amazing.
Yeah,
I need
I was
whatever
like,
he has for breakfast.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess solidarity and righteousness,
Yeah.
man. I don't know, but I need the vitamins.
Yes.
That being said, though, and like this is no shade at anybody on our city council at all, but oh my goodness, I can we emulate a bit of that in Seattle? I mean,
Seriously. Yes. I hope those who are listening take these expectations to the polls in a few weeks.
Yes, yes, and I will say I don't know if you agree with me on this note or not, Nora, but I mean I think so many people talk so much about the experience that you need to be an elected official and so forth, but I do think that the alderman certainly demonstrated to me that having an organizing background, particularly in these days and times, when
Yes.
ours may be essential
Mhm.
to the role at this point.
Yes. Yeah, and I think, if you look at some of the young people who are running for office across the country who are having some of the most success as progressive frontrunners, they're doing organizing work as they're campaigning. They're out there on the streets figuring out what people need and meeting their needs and figuring out how to get people together around the topics that matter to them. And one of the things that I find really powerful about what he's telling us is like, we can do this organizing even in times of crisis. And in fact, we have to do it in times of crisis, but we bring those skills to crisis and they're really effective in those moments in time.
I will say I might need to. I mean, I always listen to our episodes, of course, but I might need to do this one like 2 or 3 different times just to like really truly
I know.
absorb
I have to like
everything.
program it into my showers in the morning or something. It's gonna be like my hype reel.
Well, while we're on, the cloud nine here, why don't we go ahead and segue into our 8 ounces of joy for the week. You want to go first?
Sure. Well, speaking of hype reels, I well, first I wanna be clear that we are recording this on Wednesday, October 15th, and so I don't know how this week is gonna turn out, but I'm one of many Seattleites that is, like, extremely pumped right now about the Mariners, the team that loves to break your heart. Um, I was raised in a family of people who rooted for baseball teams that break your heart. My
Mm.
dad is a long-suffering Red Sox fan,
Oh my
um,
goodness.
and I just I feel like I've been feeling the magic a little bit this week. Not just that it's that they're winning, but just like the magic of collective joy that has been happening around these games. And usually I'm like a total skeptic about like organized sports ball. I'm sort of like
Right.
on in the camp of like it's opium for the masses. In my, like, annoying professor way, but I don't know, there's something about the magic of late season baseball, and people kind of losing their minds
Yeah.
over it that I think is really joyful, and no matter
Yes.
what the outcome of the game is this week, um, yeah, it's been really fun to see people get excited and emotional and sometimes have grown men cry.
Yeah. You caught me the other day. Did
I
you not?
did, I did.
I,
You were on the jumbotron.
I, I, will- I will say, Nora, like as somebody who has had his heart broken repeatedly by this Mariners team, I'm still holding out of it. They are, as of this recording, 2 wins away from their first World Series ever. And so
Ever.
I'm gonna hold it. I'm gonna hold it in. I'm gonna
I
hold
know.
it in
You can't
because
I'm trying so hard not to say the thing.
So we shall see. I'm glad that you shared that though. I'm glad that one of us is at the very least it's the heart is thawing a little bit for this team. So anyway.
Yes.
Um well on a I guess somewhat of a sad note to start off with my 8 ounces of joy. One of my favorite musicians
Mm.
died this week. D'Angelo,
Mm.
whose real name was Michael Archer. He had in my mind just three great albums. There's Brown Sugar, there's Voodoo, and then there was D'Angelo and the Vanguard, which was his final album, or at least it ended up being his final album. And I just can't tell you just how much his music meant to me as a young
Mm.
person, and really sort of reinventing soul for my generation. I know he didn't like the term neo soul. He called it. He said he was just making black music, but whatever it was called, it was great. Um, and I will say there was eh, D'Angelo. It reminded me of one of the best times of my life. So as people know who listen to our podcast regularly, I'm admittedly a John Mayer fan. Let's not have any comments from you, Nora, on that.
Silence.
I
I'm not ruining your 8 ounces of joy today.
and and so and I have some great friends. Their name Ann and AJ, and they just are absolutely lovers of D'Angelo, and they for the longest time they kept trying to see him. And he was in Seattle, but then he had to cancel because of some reason just at the last moment, so they couldn't see him. And then they were like, "Let's fly to Dallas to see him." They flew all the way to Dallas from Seattle. He canceled at the last minute,
Oh my
and
god.
Lauryn Hill was there. And so it lo and behold, the legendary Roots crew, the Roots band, they're doing a concert out in New York at Bryant Park. It is D'Angelo and John Mayer are headlining. Like probably the first and last time I would imagine. Like I even saying that I don't believe it happened. So so we all fly out to New York, right? And the trip starts pretty badly because like I'm at SeaTac, my plane is late, and then my I you go to the restroom, my bags get stolen. Like
No.
I'm like, what the heck, man? I'm thinking about why should maybe I shouldn't even go, but whatever, it's adventure. So I go. Of course, I land. at JFK Airport in New York as I'm typing in, the address to where Ann and AJ are staying at in Brooklyn. My phone dies. And I have no way to to plug it in. No way, nowhere
Oh
to
my
plug it in. It's
god.
like 1 in the morning. I think I remember where they were. I think it was
Oh
like
my
a
god.
straight line, and then you made a right onto, Belvedere Avenue or something. And so I go off on like a 2 mile journey. I think that I have the right street. I'm like, maybe this was the block. And so it's 3 in the morning. I'm just shouting in the middle of the street,
No.
man, AJ. Lo and behold, their window is open because, and they're like, even though it was like I think it was October, but they
Oh my
they were
god.
hot for some reason, and they're like, Marcus, and I'm like, oh my god, in the largest city in the United States, I am able to find these people from from memory, and so anyway, the next day it's the concert. And they're just so geared up. They're so hyped, and they're just like, "Oh, we're finally gonna see it. Let's not say it because we don't want to jinx, and we don't want to jinx it." And he pulls at the last minute. So their friend comes. I think her name is Nancy, and she had something was she was having some health problems, so she had like passed out earlier in the week, like just randomly. And so we get into Bryant Park, and D'Angelo's about an hour late, and John Mayer was on time. I don't want to say anything about that in terms of the stereotypes there, but anyway, but so Nancy ends up Anna and AJ's friend ends up passing out, and we're
No.
like we're like, oh my god, what happened? And they're, I mean, obviously we were concerned about her, but Anna and AJ are also like, damn it, we're gonna probably miss D'Angelo. Nancy somehow, I don't know what it is. She like Lazarus rises up and just like, oh, I'm okay. Yeah, let me just, sit on the side now.
I'm ready for D'Angelo.
Ready for D'Angelo. D'Angelo pops on stage. Behind him is John Mayer, and he's playing the guitar in a way that it's let's just say it's an R-rated fashion. What he was doing. I don't know what the man was doing, but I mean the guitar sounded great, but just don't look at him. He was looking. It looked like something was going on there that is not fit for the FCC. Anyway, though, we the later on that night, I have like friends from New York that we all just really want to see, and they're like, "We're at karaoke." And I'm like, "Man, I so wish that I could make it, but it's New York. This is a large area. Like I don't. I live in Beacon Hill in South Seattle. Like I don't want to go to like Capitol Hill half the time to see a friend, right?"
Yes.
And so anyway, it just so happened that the karaoke that our friends were at was literally across the street from where Ann and AJ were staying at in Brooklyn. And it's just one of those things where like everything like at a time where everything was going wrong, everything went right. And I always like conjure up that it was the magic of D'Angelo that did it. So I say that to say, folks, if you ever have a day that everything just turns out right, cherish that damn day. Love it and admonish it because those are rare. So stay, as much as you can, cherish it. Anyhow,
Yes.
all right. And go ahead and play some D'Angelo tonight. If we would have played him on our podcast, but we can't afford the royalties. I'm going to be honest with you. So you go and just hit it on the playlist when you can.
Yeah.
That being said, shall we? After my long-winded story,
That
Nora.
was an amazing story, and I want one of those for every episode now, so
I only got one, so
dig through the
I'll do a
archives,
variation.
Marcus.
I'll do a variation. Shall we go ahead and read out this
It's
episode?
as good a time as any. Well, folks, unlike the future GOP leaders who are swapping Hitler memes in those Telegram chats, we actually want you to tune in and listen, and we're so glad that you did. Huge thanks to our guest, Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez, for joining us, reminding us what real courage looks like when the country's halfway between democracy and a choose your own adventure autocracy. Please keep supporting the work happening in Chicago because solidarity shouldn't depend on who's in your group chat.
And as always, our brilliant producer, Jessica Partnow, somehow keeps us from joining the wrong side of the dual state. You know, the one where the laws are optional and the memes are felonies. We could not do this without her, so big thank you to her, and a big dose of gratitude to Aham Aluo for our music, which for the record has never once included a fascist remix. And never will. And never will.
You can find In the Meanwhile by tuning in to KVRU Wednesdays at 5 or hear our full, unbleeped episodes wherever you get your podcasts, while it's still considered a legal pastime. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. Subscribe or donate to help Marcus in his hotel room afford the internet at inthemeanwhilepodcast.com. New episodes drop every Friday. And until then, we'll see you in the meanwhile.